Remnant Radio 100.1. My name is Zach Seals, and that was Laura Story. The song is Blessings. Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for being with me. It's my joy to be with you every Wednesday morning from 9 to 12 and open the scriptures and just go through and try and share words that are encouraging and truthful and life-changing. I share these words not because you need to hear them only, but because I need to hear them too. These are reminders for me. And if you've been blessed by the show in the past, if you've been listening for the last few weeks I've been here, and you want to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. It's a strange thing. I'm new to radio, and it's a different thing not knowing who is on the other side of that microphone listening into what you're saying. So if you want to shoot me an email and let me know any thoughts you may have on what was shared in the show, or maybe request a topic, request some songs, any feedback whatsoever, go ahead and send an email to See the Glory Radio. That's S-E-E, See the Glory Radio at gmail.com. And I'd be happy to respond and interact with you there. Be great to hear from you. Well, I shared that song by Laura Story called Blessings because it really gives an honest expression of what it looks like to recognize that God is sovereign, even over our difficulties and trials in life, even over the most painful circumstances in our lives. And that is just one of the many honest responses that we can have when we accept the gospel and we accept understanding and recognizing who God is as the ultimate creator and ruler and preserver of everything in this universe, that he is in charge and we are not, and that as he calls us to become more like him and more like his son, he does so by bringing us through very difficult circumstances. And that's why James, this book of wisdom, drawing on the Proverbs and the sermons of Jesus, James was actually a brother of Jesus. And even though his brothers didn't first believe his message, as we know in the Gospels, sometime after Jesus rose again, we find out that they did come to believe who Jesus was. And James even led the early church in Jerusalem. He was a pillar and a foundational figure in that early Christian community. And so his message to this early group of Christians is to be a servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's how he opens his book. He says, I'm a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. A pretty remarkable statement. He could have said, yeah, the guy that rose from the dead, I'm his brother, right? So, I mean, if he rose from the dead, I'm his brother. You should listen to me because I'm pretty great. But he doesn't. He says, I'm a servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's what he would urge you to be as well. And he opens his letter saying, greetings. And then in verse 2, right away, he starts off. I mean, chapter 1's really going to bring up all the themes and all of the main key words that you'll find all throughout the rest of the book. From chapters 2 to 5, it's all recapitulating topics that are introduced in chapter 1. But he opens up with that theme of suffering that we've talked about before. He says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. That word perfect is so key in the book of James. It appears 7 times, and it has this idea of wholeness. Really, the message of James is, how do we become whole before God and integrate our confession with our practice, what we say we believe, but with how we really live. That is imaged quite well in verse 27 of the end of chapter 1, where it says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this. This is what it looks like to truly be religious. Visit orphans and widows in their afflictions, keep oneself unstained by the world, unstained from the world. Don't let the pressures of culture and society, different social groups, even the temptations of your own desires and flesh, to compromise your conviction about what you say you believe about Jesus being the Lord of your life, being the ruler, and then following and obeying after his commands because you love him. Don't be stained from the world. And above and beyond that, go out to care for others, particularly the afflicted, the poor, the lowly, the outcast in society. That's the kind of holistic picture. And it's so easy when we're suffering and in difficulty to focus on ourselves. It's something that pain does. It focuses our mind, and it tries to push out all other distractions, and it says, I'm just going to deal with this problem. I'm just going to deal with my problem. I'm just going to deal with my hurt. Because other people don't realize how difficult what I'm going through right now is. And so what James calls us to do is to not let your own suffering, not let your own trials tune you out from the trials and pains and difficulties in other people's lives. Because this is a broken world, and we all need to be there for each other in suffering. And so we can count it joy when we're giving these trials, because we know that this is a way that we participate in the sufferings and trials that Christ went through. Jesus himself was tested. He went through the wilderness, and Satan came and tempted him when he was hungry with food and tempted him with power. And Jesus overcame those tests. And then here we find that we are called to do so as well, so that we can show, and not just show, but actually generate and produce a steady steadfastness. And that has this full effect. Now, we desire to be perfect, we desire to be holistic, but that's something that we can't do on our own. We're called to strive after that. But the only way to have that ultimate perfection, which will only truly fully be attained when Jesus comes back, and when we're given this glorious new body and we are transformed fully into his likeness, that will be attained in the future. But we can reach degrees and stages of it. We can seek maturity in this life only if we ask God for wisdom. Because wisdom is not something we have naturally. It's not something we stumble upon and find on our own by grabbing a book off the shelf. It's not just the addition of facts of knowledge. It's really the ability to see things from a greater perspective. It's not just having more information. It's having the information in context, in the right angle. And in the biblical view, it's seeing things from God's perspective. If you see things from God's perspective, or at least recognizing that his perspective is greater than yours, then you'll start to realize, okay, my hardships can be a blessing. My hardships can be a source of joy, not because in and of themselves they're good, but because they can produce good. That's what Joseph said to his brothers in Genesis 50. What you meant as evil against me, God meant for good. And that's what God does through our hardships. And if we ask him for wisdom, this ability to see things from a greater perspective, to recognize that God's view is larger than our own, and it changes the end result. If we ask him for wisdom, God says he will give generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. So I want to leave us with that today. As we enter into this book of James, we encounter very difficult sayings. It's not easy to count our trials as joy. It's not easy to say, God, I'm going to be steadfast in this time because I believe in your message. But that's what we're called to do as Christians, to ask for wisdom in faith, and God will give it. We're going to continue going through the book of James. Thank you for being here with me. My name is Zach Seals. You're listening to See the Glory. This is Remnant Radio 100.1. You're about to listen to 10th Avenue North. The song is Don't Stop the Madness. And it really